oldest of the Mass family. Actually, there was one in between you and Lawrence, but you're the second living oldest of the Mass family, and so we're just going to get some excerpts from your life story and things that you remember, and it's going to add to the archives, the Mass archives. And I hope that cricket gets quiet pretty soon. Okay. Now, Dan, tell us about your earliest memories. What's the earliest thing that you remember?
My earliest memory is when I was 5 years old. And at 5 years old, God called me. And I told my mother, I want to be a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
At 5 years old.
At 5 years old.
And so my dad and my mom were discussing what's a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
They had no idea what a Christian was. And they were discussing what's a Christian. Mm-hmm. But I knew what a Christian was. Mm-hmm. And I walked out and I looked up at the sky and I was praying every night. I was looking up and praying. Mm-hmm. And I knew exactly what a Christian was. And I had never heard the word Christian. Mm-hmm. But I told my mother, I want to be a Christian. Mm-hmm. And they had no idea what a Christian was. And because of that, during my lifetime, I have never got into trouble. Mm-hmm. I've never had a police statement of any kind. Mm-hmm. And when I was mistreated, I did not mistreat them. Mm-hmm. Okay. I just let them go their way, and if they abandoned me, like my first wife, and run other men and so forth, I just let them go, and I did the best I could. I took care of the kids until I was finally out. Mm-hmm. And when I was out, I was kind of downhearted because I wondered who's going to take care of the children, because she abandoned the children, and Rosie had to take over where I left. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I hated that part, but there wasn't much I could do about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, your earliest memories there, Dan, you remember the little red house we lived in?
Yes.
What things do you remember about the little red house?
The little red house, the chicken thieves came.
Oh, is that right?
The chicken thieves, they came and stole all the chickens. And we had a chicken house and had about 80 chickens. You know, a lot of eggs and so forth. And the chicken thieves came and they stole every one of them. Okay. And so Johnny Byler came over with the buggy, and my dad and Johnny, we had the shotgun. They both had a shotgun, and they chased the chicken thieves.
Really?
And they began to drop chickens, and they went on and on. They got every chicken back.
Is that right?
They got every chicken back. And they put them all back in the pen, and they never lost a one. And every so far they shot, and every time they shot, they dropped more chickens. And I remember there was a tank there, and there was a possum in the tank. And I took a broom handle, I stuck it down, and the possum bit the end of the handle off.
Oh, the handle.
It just went crunch and just cut it off. It could bite a leg off, bite a hand off. They really have strong jaws. It just went crunch and just bit the end of the broom off.
Yeah.
And when I was very small, I would say maybe 3 years old, something like that, and I run out and I stepped in a nail. The nail stuck at the bottom of my feet, and Lawrence ran into the house, and he said, "Da Danny, da Danny, da Danny, da Danny." He couldn't say what was wrong. He just said, "Da Danny, da Danny, da Danny." And then finally my dad came out, picked me up, pulled the nail out, took me into the house, and put some stuff on my foot, you know, and I was all right. And the road in front of the little red house was dirt. And I remember while we lived there that a bunch of men came down. Everything was done by hand. And they were scattering with shovels, they were scattering the stones and stuff on there, and then they would put tar on it and more stones and tar, all by hand because there was very few equipment. And finally they had this big called four-wheel drive, and it was very primitive and very slow, and it came down about the speed of a tractor, you know, and it was roaring and roaring, coming down there, and it was dragging a board to kind of smooth it over, you know, and so forth, and they had very little equipment at that time. And finally they got the road blacktop all by hand.
Wow.
And they had 5-gallon buckets, and they had a thing, they squirted it like this, you know, on, because they didn't have any equipment to shoot it on faster.
Yes.
And it took a long time.
Yes.
And at that time, there were no concrete roads anywhere. They had some blacktop and dirt.
Is that right?
No concrete.
No concrete.
And the road going to Wyoming was only halfway, was concrete, and only halfway. And so you went down the concrete, and if you met someone and you were on the left side, you had to pull on the dirt till they came past, and then you pulled again on the concrete, which was a 9-foot.
9 foot there.
9 foot, that's all there was.
Wow.
And it was just halfway. And then finally, when I got older and I was like 8 or 10 years old, they got it concreted all the way across. And as years went by, they got more and more equipment. They could do it faster, more efficient. And till to the present day, present day they can do so much so quick.
Right. But you couldn't do that.
And but I remember when everything was really primitive.
Yeah. Now, tell them about Dad working for William Webb, Bill Webb.
Yeah. When Dad worked for William Webb, everything was by hand. All the hay, he had to pitch it on the wagon. Everything, pitching on the wagon. There was no such a thing as having an automatic unit in the back of the wagon that would pick it up and drop it on the wagon. It was not invented yet. They just, everything, he pitched it on. And Will Webb said that my dad could pitch more hay than anyone he's ever had.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Pitch more hay.
Yeah, he was really strong at that time.
Yeah.
And Dad, in his later days, he got sick. He never went to the doctor. He got high blood pressure. He should have gone to the doctor. He died at a young age of 53. Didn't quite make 54. And he should have gone to the doctor more and been treated.
Right.
He could probably still be alive.
Yeah. So what did Dad do for Will Webb? All the things he did, milk cows and all sorts of things.
He plowed with horses, and then finally Will Webb got a Fordson tractor.
Oh.
A Fordson tractor, and it had a worm gear in the back, and that made a lot of noise. Woo, woo, woo! And it didn't have any speed. The wheel just went slow like this, you know. And it would do a little bit more than the horses, but not much more.
Not much more.
Than the horses.
Than the horses would.
And finally, before I got away from Pratt School at the 6th grade, they had a gray Ford tractor. And the gray Ford tractor would do twice as much as that old old Ford's son.
Yeah.
You know.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first went to school, I couldn't talk any English.
Mm-hmm.
I was just German, you know.
Yeah.
In fact, I told my mother I can't go to school because I don't know any English. But when I got to school, within 2 or 3 days, I picked it right up.
Picked it up. Yeah.
Yeah. Like a kid does, you know, pick it right up.
Yeah. Now, tell me about Dad's work there on the farm. How'd you make it? My mom said he made $1 a day, and you had what, 4 or 5 kids on $1 a day. How did you make it?
All summer we went barefooted.
Really?
All summer.
No shoes?
We run around, our feet were just as tough as they could be. We run around all summer with barefoot, and we had 1 pair of shoes for the winter.
And so, what about food? How'd you make it? Where'd you get your food from?
Food, there were no refrigerators.
Oh, is that right?
Now, we had an ice box, but it was kind of a small ice box, just big enough for some milk and some butter, and they came around with a big truck loaded with ice, you know, and they would carry it and throw it in there. And a big chunk of ice would be like 15 cents.
Is that right?
10 to 15 cents.
How long would it last?
It would last 2 or 3 days.
Is that right? Big chunk of ice lasts 2 or 3 days.
And they would come like twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week. And they would keep us in ice. And refrigerators at that time was not invented. There were no refrigerators around, but there were ice trucks everywhere hauling ice.
Is that right?
Yeah. And the ice in Dover was made by a slow-running diesel. And it had a great big flywheel and a big connecting rod, and it ran about 300 RPM.
Wow.
It went like this: pop, 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 pop. That great big thing going around.
How many cylinders is that? 1 cylinder, 2?
One cylinder.
1 cylinder.
1 cylinder. The cylinder was about this big around,
right?
And about that long, you know.
And the flywheel was crazy.
Yeah, and that great big flywheel, and the belt was around, and it had a compressor, but Freon was not invented. The refrigerant was very strong, was where you could smell it.
Yeah.
And what was the name of that? I just can't. It was very strong, and they used it as a refrigerant, you know. And the ice plant had big chunks of ice all over, and it did work, you know.
It did work. Works okay.
And then down the road, the regular refrigerant was invented, you know, R12.
Right, R12.
R12,
right.
Yeah. It was invented, and so they switched over, and then they put a smaller motor on, 4-cylinder.
Yeah.
And it did more than the 1 big cylinder, you know. And they became more modern, and eventually, after electric was connected everywhere, when I first went to Webb's house, that was Dad's employer, Will Webb. He had flat belts. V-belts were not invented yet. He had a flat belt to a grinder. He had a flat belt to a corn sheller. He had a flat belt to there was another thing they had there, I forget exactly what it did. There were 3 things, and they could move the flat belt from one to the other, you know. V-belts weren't invented yet, but then later on they were invented. And the electric motor was about this big in diameter and this wide, and it was like 3 horsepower.
Yeah. Wow.
That big thing was only 3 horsepower. That's all. But eventually they had a motor like this, and it's 10 horsepower. a smaller motor and more power.
More power to it.
Yeah. You know, they
Yeah.
began to speed it up,
Yeah.
you know, faster and all that.
Right. Right.
And the electric motors got more powerful, smaller,
Yeah.
and more power and all that. And everything just advanced. Now, only one farm in 25 farms had electric.
Is that right?
And when we lived on the Webb place, we had no electric.
Is that right? No.
Never had any electric. We
No.
carried lanterns everywhere and all that, and we had a wood stove, and we had piles of wood and all that. And meat, they, to keep meat, not by freezing, but they put it in salt.
Mm-hmm.
And just covered it up with salt.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, and
Preserved it.
to preserve it. And but when you got ready to eat it, it took a long time to get the salt out because it was just saturated with salt. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
took a long time to get the salt out.
And what did you eat when you were little? What did Mom make usually for a meal?
She made cornbread, biscuits. She killed a chicken every once in a while. We'd have chicken to eat, and once in a long while we killed a calf or something like that, you know, and had meat from that. And but mostly it was just pig meat, mostly
pig meat
from pigs.
Mm-hmm.
And while we were over there, we had a separator, a milk separator, and we had to turn it. Took a long time to get all the speed up, you know, turn it, and it separated the cream from the milk, you know, and and when we had the cream, we churned it and made butter out of it.
Is that right? Made butter out of it.
And then when we got on the next place was next to Ivan Bryant place.
Mm-hmm.
And when we moved there, we had a Dalco 32 volt.
Oh, okay.
32 volts. And whenever the preachers came around, my dad said, "That's not mine."
He said it was his?
Yeah, I said it's not mine. And it wasn't, because he was just renting.
Renting it.
But then he bought it for $3,000. Well, $2,800. $2,800 he bought the farm.
Oh, okay.
But when the preachers came around, he said it belongs to the landlord. But he told a lie.
Yeah.
And the next thing we knew, the Amish were just swarming the place, and they said, "You lied to us." And so then he was out, and then we went down to the Mennonite church.
Well, what Amish bishops were involved there?
Nevin Bender.
No, but in the Amish church. Do you remember?
Oh, yes, John Hustedler.
John Hustedler. He was the main one?
Yeah, he was one, and there was some others. Norman Schwarzentrooper.
Mm-hmm.
He was not the bishop, but he was like next to the bishop.
Next to the bishop.
You know.
Mm-hmm.
And Norman Schwarzentrooper's, one of his boys, he had like a shredder to shred corn and all that. And he sent me to ask him to come over to our place, and he said, "Smak bala." He hollered, "Smak bala."
Smak bala.
Yeah.
Makes trouble, huh?
Yeah, It makes bother.
Makes bother, right.
Makes bother. Smak bala. And then he wouldn't come over.
He wouldn't come over.
He wouldn't come over. And my dad was in a lot of trouble with Amish, but he went to Amish sales and he bid on cows.
Is that right?
See, and they weren't supposed to take the money, but the Amish man said, "I'll meet you behind the barn." And he took it behind the barn. You could buy, those days you could buy a good cow for $20.
Yeah. Tell me about your early education. You went to Pratt School. What happened there in Pratt School?
Yeah, I went to Pratt School and I graduated from the 6th grade.
From 6th grade? You went to 6th grade?
Yeah, and then I went to Hartley and I got 7th and 8th grade.
Uh-huh.
But Dad stood by the bus.
Oh, okay.
See, he was younger, you know, he stood by the bus to keep me from getting on the bus.
Is that right? After 8th grade?
After 8th grade, yeah. He said, you don't need any more than 8th grade. He said, every one of you will be a mechanic or a farmer or something like that. You don't need any education, you know.
Yeah.
And all that. And but as soon as I got away, I went to Dover School. And there was no computers.
Mm-hmm.
There was no computers. There was very little, and I don't know how that they could get any information because they asked, "How much do I have?" I said 8th grade. I graduated from 8th grade, and they went in the back, and they were there for a long time, but they were on the phone calling, and they came out and they said, "You got 7th grade, you don't have 8th grade." And so I made a trip down south to the Mennonite church. And I went to the school and I said, "Do you have a record that I graduated from the 8th grade?" And they said, "We threw all our records away." Isn't that nice?
Yeah, that's something.
Threw all our records away. So I went back to school and I said, Mennonite church don't have any records. I said, I graduated from the 8th grade. And they said, "Well, we can't help that. You're out." They said, "You're out." And I sat there for 3 hours. I wouldn't go home. I just sat there, you know. And I said, "Give me a test, you know, give me a test." And so they kept looking out there, and finally they had a little conference, you know, and finally they came out and they said, "You're the most stubborn people that we have ever confronted." They said they've never seen anybody so darn stubborn as you. You won't leave the premises. And I said, "I need my education." And they said, "What we'll do, we'll give you 2 subjects." And he said, "You'll flunk them both." He said, "Just pick any 2." He said, "Here we got a whole list of them." And so I picked Algebra 1 and Science. And but Science, you know, was biology. I did dissections and all kinds of stuff, you know. And they said, "We're going to check your grade after the first semester." And said, "I know you'll flunk them both." They just kept saying, "You'll flunk them both." And so at the end of the first semester, they called me in there, and they looked at my grades, and they looked at me, and they looked at my grades, and they looked at me, and they said, "How in the heck could you make A in both of them units?" You know, I made an A in both of them. And they said, "Well, go ahead and get your education." And I did, and I graduated.
Graduated from high school.
And I could not have got the job as an inspector, you know, with less in high school.
Yeah, yeah. Now, Dad was self-employed about all of his life, and he had a number of employees. Just tell us a little bit about Dad's employees. What kind of people he picked, like Ben Downing, Oliver Patton, Felix Rigsby, Frank Ludwig, Joe Spiker. Just tell us a little bit about some of those employees.
Yeah, he had one called Prattis. What was his first name? Prattis. His last name was Prattis.
Is that right?
And he had a car.
Uh-huh.
But there was, he had a partner, and his name was Holtite.
Oh, okay. I didn't know about that.
Now, Adam Baller said that it's actually Tight Hold. He said he reversed it.
Oh,
okay. He said it's not Hold Tight, but his name is Tight Hold.
Tight Hold.
I don't know how he figured that out. And so they said to him, "Sing a song." And then he started singing. First he went like this, ooh, like that, you know. And then nothing. And finally he said, ooh. And when he started singing, he really sang. I mean, you could hear it for a long way, you know. So my dad said, "That's enough."
He was tired of it, huh?
Yeah, I said, "That's enough." You know, and he would shut down. But then some people that worked with him, you know, they would say, "Hold tight, give us a song." And he would go like this, "Ooh," and then nothing. Finally, he would go, "Ooh," and then all at once he started singing just loud. You could hear him for a long ways, you know, and he was just really shouting and singing and all that. And finally, Dad said, "Shut up."
Did he sing well or not?
Yeah, he could sing.
He could sing. He could carry a tune.
But Norman Pratis couldn't sing a song. He couldn't sing nothing. Yeah. They never knew his name. His name was not really Hold Tight.
Yeah, right.
Because they just called him out. He didn't know what his name was. He had never been to school.
Never been to school.
Never educated or nothing.
Yeah. Now, where did he get Ben Downing from?
Now, Ben Downing, he got him out of jail.
Really?
Mm-hmm. He went down to the jail, and he said, "I need someone to work for me." And he said, "That man there, he said he didn't do that much out of the way to get in jail." Said, "If you need him, take him." But he said, "If you turn him loose and let him go, and he leaves the premises, let us know, because we'll go and pick him up."
Pick him up. Mm-hmm.
And
so he was like being in jail while I was working for your dad. He was sort of confined.
Yeah, he was confined. Yeah, and so he was working for us, and he could see things.
Is that right?
Yeah, he said he said when he was sleeping that there was a bunch of men were looking at him. And he says they came into the house and they were looking at him and looking him over and so forth, and he was afraid that he was going to get hurt. But he said they finally left, and he was just talking, and he said that when he was born, he had a shawl over his face, and they had to remove it. And he said all the people that have a shawl over their face when they're born, and they can see spirits.
Oh, okay.
And he would look out in the dark, and he said, "It is just full of angels and everything." He says, "It's the devil's angels." He said, "I can see it's the devil's angels. They're all dancing around outside and everywhere." And he said, when he goes to bed, he has a bucket of water there, and he puts some salt in it. And he said, that'll keep him away.
Is that right?
Yeah, but how could that keep him away,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And I never saw anybody around there and so forth. And he told story after story, you know, that it couldn't have happened.
Yeah.
It just couldn't have happened.
Yeah.
And they finally came and took him away.
Oh, they did?
Yeah.
Came and took him away again?
Yeah. He worked for my dad for about 2 years.
Is that right? Now, didn't Dad play a trick on him? Tie something across the pathway, across the road or something?
Yeah, I think he did. And my dad played a trick on him, and he started running. And could he ever run? Man, did he run. He just run across the field. No one could catch him.
Is that right?
Yeah, he got scared and really went. Your
dad made it like he was a ghost or something like that?
Yeah, And my dad got under a shock, a corn shock.
Yeah,
And as he walked past, he picked up on the shock, you know, and shook it and all that. And he got scared and he run, and man, did he run. you know. But he blamed it on the spirit.
He blamed it on the spirit, even though Dad did
spirit,
it.
Yeah. And there was a man lived in a little shack and he walked through our property every day, and then he'd walk back, and he had a little path and a little shack way back in the woods there.
What was his name?
And
Herman Ray? Was that Herman Ray, or was that somebody else?
Herman Ray. I think it was Herman Ray.
Yeah, he lived in a little body, like a body of a truck.
Yeah, I think it was Herman Ray, if I remember right. And I walked back and I looked at his little shack, you know, back in there in the woods, and I thought I wouldn't want to live there, you know. And
he washed his dishes in the mud puddle?
Yeah, and he had shotguns and shells all over the place, and you had to be careful, you know, he'd shoot you.
Yeah, yeah.
And he was back there, and had dogs all over the place, you know, had dogs tied everywhere. And if during the night, if the dogs barked, he'd come out and shoot the shotgun, you know, in the direction of where the dogs were looking. You know, so you wouldn't want to be there at night.
Yeah. Allow them not to get out of there.
Yeah, and you have to be careful. You know, if you go back there, you might get shot.
Yeah,
know?
right.
And
what about Felix? What do you remember about Felix?
Felix, he kept saying, my sister's in Philadelphia. And then sometimes he said, my mother's in Philadelphia.
So both of them were in Philly.
Yeah, both were true.
Yeah, both were true.
It was his half-sister. It was his half-sister, and
also his mother.
Also his mother. See?
So it's a case
because Felix wasn't 100%. You know, he acted funny, and he was an inbred. You know, inbred.
Right.
And he had that 60 Ford with a 60 engine. And that thing wide open wouldn't go more than about 60. You know, it had just a little V8, just a little V8 in it. And he finally found a woman and got married, and he couldn't even see his son, because if he would go to see his son towards Hazelville, the son would run him off.
Oh, okay. Is that Roland? Roland Rigsby?
It might have been Roland.
Now, Roland worked for Dad, too, didn't he? So?
Yeah, I think he did, yeah. And he was very restricted. He finally married a woman and lived in Marydale.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I remember that.
Marydale.
Yeah. Because I went to see him with Dad one time.
Yeah.
In Marydale.
And but then as soon as we moved on to Bryant place, then I was about 12 years old, I think. I was about 12 years old, and he was excommunicated because he had electric.
Yeah.
And see, Dad kept saying it's the landlord, you know, it's not mine, it's the landlord, and so forth. But they had a way of finding out that that he did own the house.
Own the house, yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so because of the electric, they excommunicated him.
Now, did they excommunicate Mom too?
Oh yeah.
Well, she didn't do anything, did she?
No,
How'd she think of? What'd you think?
Yeah,
about that?
you would have thought. I mean, because he's guilty, there shouldn't be both guilty.
No.
And but there was a deacon in the church. They called him a deacon, and he was at our house every week, walking around, see if anything that's a violation. We had a sawmill in the back there, and he would come out there and said, "How you doing?" And he said, "You got electric." And he said, "It's a landlord," and, you know, and the guy said, "You got no landlord, you own it." And he tried to say he didn't own it, but he did.
He did, yeah.
He owned it. And then the very next Saturday, there was about 40 buggies.
40?
40 buggies that pulled in, yeah. and there were whiskers everywhere, going through the house, going through everything.
I mean, like the Nazis. I mean, like the Gestapo going in inspection.
Yeah, and we had a garage and had a padlock on it, and they were able to pull the door out far enough. They had flashlights, and they seen the car in there and all that, you know.
So you had the car hidden.
Yeah, so then he was out.
And he was out. Okay.
Yeah, I was 12 years old.
You were 12 years old then.
Yeah. See, I never got to go with the Amish, you know, as a young person because I was too young, you know.
So what happened when you went to the Mennonites? What do you remember about that?
I went to the Mennonites. He was playing the radio.
Oh,
and they said, radios are not allowed. And he said, I'll take it out.
Oh, he did that.
He said, I'll take it out, but he never took it out. And then they would look and they'd say, you got a radio in there. You're not supposed to have a radio. And he says, I'll take it out. But he never took it out.
Never took it out.
And the next thing you know, they were, they didn't excommunicate him, but they said that he could never have a position in the church because he's got violations, you know. But now, they've got TVs, they got it all.
Yeah, everything, yeah.
They got everything.
That was just a little ahead of his time.
Yeah.
And when you went to Greenwood, did you also stay there and eat, like Mills Fortune Tubers or Lorenzo Sleigh Balls, like remember that?
Mostly at Savannah's house.
Oh, okay, Savannah's house.
One time I remember eating at Eli's Fortune Trooper's house, and we were in the barn, and one of the boys was with me. Now, Earl was the older one. What was the younger one?
Earl David. David's Fortune Trooper Earl's. No.
I forget. I remember what he looked. I know the older one was Earl, but the younger one, we were in the barn, and he said, "Would you jump out of this hole?" You know, the hay was all the way up to the peak, you know, and we were looking out there and said, "If you would jump out, where would you land?" And I said, "There on the ground." I said, you know, probably break my neck and everything else.
Yeah.
And he said, no, you would land in the lake of fire. But that's not true. See, that's not true.
Yeah.
You see, the Mennonites, with few exceptions, they're a cult. The Amish are a cult. Because when I start going to other churches, and then I realize they are cults. That's all they are. It's cults, that's it.
Yeah.
It's a system of works. If you do good enough, you'll make it. If you don't do good enough, you won't make it. But if you're a Christian, you're a Christian.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Now, what about Noah Lee? You had quite a lot.
Noah Lee, you could never figure him out. He had hang up mentally. And he had this laugh where he would go, you know, he had the funniest laugh that I ever seen. Right. And so they told him he had this Oldsmobile. I think it was a '49 Oldsmobile, and he said, "Can you spin that thing around?" And he jumped in it and spun all over the place and spun around. And literally, you know, tore his car up and run into stuff and all that. And I thought, there's something wrong up here.
Up there, yeah.
There's something wrong up here to do that. I would never do that with my car.
Yeah.
And so they were making fun of him and all that, you know, when he spun the car around and so forth. And see, they had drug a bunch of logs up there, the whole tree, you know, and then he had a chainsaw and he'd measure it and he was cutting it, you know, into logs and all that, and he just kept the chainsaw going pop, 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 pop. He never shut it down.
Never shut it down.
Because he didn't want anyone to talk to him, make fun of him.
Oh,
See?
okay.
And he just kept it running all the time. And he cut it up, and as soon as he was done cutting up all the logs, he ran to his car and took off.
Is that right?
He never even collected his wages.
Is that right?
Yeah, and he left, and he never came back, you know, because they were making fun of him and all that. And when he used to go on Sundays, instead of going to church, he went to the beach. What's the name of the beach when you go south along the
Rehoboth?
Yeah, Rehoboth Beach. Yeah, we went to Rehoboth Beach, and we'd walk up and down, you know, on Sunday. And he was never in church, and but I did go to church most of the time, and he would go like crazy, you know, with a car. He'd go like 70, 75 miles an hour, and then the car would run on 7 cylinders, then 6, then 5, and then it starts slowing down. And finally he was going like 30 miles an hour. And so he took the plugs out, cleaned the plugs up, you know, and put them in there. And then would hit all 8, and then he'd go about 75 miles an hour, and then finally 7, then 6, and then 5, and then 4, and it started slowing down. So then he took all the plugs. He had to clean the plugs twice just to get to Rehoboth.
Is that right?
Yeah, he had to clean them twice.
Twice to get to Rehoboth. Wow.
Yeah. And the reason for it, he never changed oil.
Is that right?
He just left that old oil in there and everything. You can't do that. You know, it's going to grind the motor out and all that. And that's what happened. He didn't take care of his motor. You know, you got to service it. You got to put new oil in it, new filter, and really take care of it. You know, to make it last.
Yeah, right.
And but now my SUV has 150,000 on it. And it runs like a new one. It'll probably run 400,000.
Right, right.
And a motor now, you can't hardly wear it out.
Yeah.
You just can't. It'll just go and go and go
for you.
A long time. Probably go 400,000.
Right.
And if I go 67, not 70, but 67, I get about 24 miles to the gallon.
That's something.
But if I go 70, I get about 19.
Is that right? So it drops that much?
It drops that much, yeah. As long as I stay away from 70, and I go like 67, 68, 66, to keep it in that area, I get about 23, 24 miles to the gallon. From South Carolina, I was still in South Carolina, to here, it only used a half a tank.
Wow. Wow. That's all. Now, you were in Greenwood 2 years, right? Lived in the middle of the woods?
Yeah,
And anything more you want to add about Greenwood, living in the house there? Did we have any electricity in Greenwood?
No electricity.
No running water?
No running water.
No toilet?
All we had is just a pump out there, the pump in the back.
No gas, no bathroom?
And no bad. They had a toilet.
Toilet outside.
Yeah, outside. Yeah, that's all. No electric. All time we were there. No electric.
And you knew Henry Miller at that time.
Yeah.
What kind of person was he?
Henry, from the time I met him, he was about this tall when I first met him. I was taller than him at the time, and he was behind the barn, cigarettes.
Is that right?
Yeah, smoking. Smoking continually, and he rubbed snuff
Wow.
And he had some bottles with whiskey in them that he stole, and from from Ammon and some of the others. Mostly from Irvin.
Yeah.
Irvin smoked and drank.
Drank.
And all that.
All that.
And he just guzzled whiskey whenever he could. He smoked whenever he could.
Yes.
And he died at like age 38 or 39
Right.
or something.
Around 40.
Yeah. He died. Yeah.
Now Ammon was about the strongest person around.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. See, Ammon took care of himself.
He
took care of himself, and he's in pretty good shape now.
Yeah. Well, Ammon is 83.
I talked to Ammon. Yeah.
He's, and so, did you have wrestling matches?
Yeah, I could wrestle Henry, and
No, get it.
I could pin him in no time.
No time.
Because see, I took care of myself, but he didn't. And he had no wind. He had no stamina.
Right. Right.
I
So
could
you
just
pin him.
throw him down. I could pick him over my head and throw him down. Do anything with him. I could do.
What do you remember about moving back to Hartley?
When we moved back to Hartley to the Annalore house, we did have electric. We did have electric 60 amps.
Is that right?
That's all.
That's all, 60 amps.
That's it. And there was no electric in the barn, but we ran it underground. We dug a ditch.
Right?
We dug a ditch all the way out, and at that time they were already making underground wire, and we ran 2 wires, no ground.
No ground, just 2 wires.
Just 2 wires, 120. And it's been that way for years, and we ran the milkers off of it and all that. And also the sheds. I wired the sheds.
You wired the shed, is that right? You wired the sheds?
I wired the sheds, already knew electric, you know.
Right.
And we had receptacles that we could plug in and so forth. And you know, I was working on cars.
Is that right?
Years ago, I had as many as 7 cars.
Is that right?
Lined up, and I would fix one and send him on his way, and they'd pay me. The next one would bring the
So you
car
had a
out.
little garage activity of service there.
Yeah, and for quite a while, there was a long row of cars, and as fast as I could get, I could fix them. But you can't do that no more.
Yeah.
Yeah, a motor, you can't work on it. You have to have special training and special tools, and you just can't work on a motor anymore.
Right.
But a motor doesn't need any work. A motor, a good motor, if you take care of it, it'll run 400,000 or 500,000. You can't wear it out.
Can't wear it out, right?
You can't wear it out.
If you take care of it.
If you take care of it.
Yeah.
Now, if you don't change oil and so forth, it's going to go bad. But if you keep good oil in it and everything and maintain and so forth, that thing will just go and go and go almost forever.
Forever.
But mine runs just like a new one. You know, 150,000.
Yeah. And so you had a Model T, didn't you, at one time?
Model A.
Model A. Okay.
I ran it for 1 year.
Is that right? And then what did you get?
After that, I got it was a 30, and I got a 36.
You got a 36. Model A was a 30, you got a 36.
A 36 would run about 85.
Is that right?
You know, it had a flat V8.
Now, Model A would only run how far? How fast?
If you had a good Model A, it would run 70, but mine would only run 63. And Noah Lee had a little coupe Chevy, and it was 34. I think it was 34 Chevy, and I beat him with a Model A.
Is that right? You beat him with a Model A.
He was going wide open, and I passed him with a Model A.
Wow.
63. My Model A would only do 63. But his car did about 59.
Yeah. Now, in the farm, Dad started out with a sawmill, or did he start out milking cows first?
He milked cows, but then eventually he got a sawmill.
Oh, okay, milked cows, then got a sawmill.
Yeah. he figured that he couldn't make enough money off of the cows, so he had the sawmill, and he hauled firewood to people, and he made money wherever he can, you know, and he really worked hard.
Did he give any free labor out, like the Henry Troyers or Schrock?
Well, Henry Schrock and Henry Troyer, they would lend our stuff and they would tear it up.
Oh, is that right?
See, my dad had a side delivery rake, and they come over and got it, and when they brought it back, it was tore up. You know, they did that over and over, and then my dad had to fix it.
Then he had to fix it, go back and fix it.
Yeah.
Now, wasn't Henry Troyer sick with diabetes and you had to go farm his land for a while?
Yeah, Henry Troyer would never do any work. He would sit on the tractor and maybe sit on the tractor for a few hours, but not all day, maybe for 3 or 4 hours, then he would go back to the house. Henry Schrock worked from daylight to dark.
So he was a worker.
Day after day, and Henry Troyer laid and slept. And he would never do a day's work. He wouldn't do nothing. Henry Troyer worked himself to death.
I mean, Henry Schrock did.
Yeah, Henry Schrock. Henry Troyer. He would sit on a tractor for maybe 3 or 4 hours, and then he'd leave the tractor set in the field. He'd go to the house, and he'd be asleep.
Yeah.
You know, and he said that he wasn't well, but he was well. He was just lazy.
Yeah.
He was just lazy, good for nothing.
Yeah.
And see, Henry Troyer's wife was adopted.
Oh, okay.
See, Henry Schrock's wife could not have any children, so they adopted
Ada.
Yeah. And then Henry Troyer married her, and she had a longer beard than Henry did.
Henry did, yeah.
A
little bit of male hormone.
Yeah, she had a lot of, you know, hanging down.
Yeah, right.
And but they had 3 girls and 2 boys.
Wow.
And the boys were lazy. They wouldn't do nothing.
Is that right?
Just like see, they got lessons from their father. The father didn't do nothing, neither did the boys.
Yeah. So now tell me about Joe Spiker. He worked for Dad for a while, for quite some time, didn't he?
Yeah, Joe Spiker, there was something wrong mentally with him. And he had this old terraplane. It was like a terraplane. I believe it was a terraplane. And he was going, he would drive maybe 35 miles an hour or something like that. And so I said to Spiker, what was his first name?
Joe.
Joe Spiker, yeah. And I would say to Joe, I said, how fast you go, 25 mile an hour? And he said, I wasn't going 25, I was hitting 35. Well, 35 is no speed either.
No speed either.
He said, I was hitting 35. And he drove his car into my shop where I worked on the cars. And I stood there, and he had a jack with a smooth top underneath the axle in the front, because there was an axle there, and jacked it up, and it fell off on him.
Really? It fell on him?
Yeah, the jack, he knocked the jack out, and the weight of the thing fell on him, and he says, quick, it's going to kill me. And I grabbed the 2x4, and I stuck it underneath, and I picked up all I could pick up.
Is that right?
And he crawled out.
Well, that would have killed him, but taken his breath away.
It would have killed him, yeah. and I picked it up with a 2x4, and he crawled out, and he grabbed
okay?
and he grabbed the jack and stuck it under there and says, "Let it down." And then he crawled right under again. Poof, poof, poof.
Never stopped him.
And see that, and I thought it was going to fall down on him again. He must have been pretty tough.
He was tough. He was tough.
Yeah.
He was tough. That's right.
But if I wouldn't have been there, I would have killed him. He couldn't have got out.
Yeah, yeah. Then Dad had an employee called Frank Ludwig.
Yeah.
And he was quite a checker player and chess player, right?
Yeah. But see, Frank Ludwig, he was pretty good at checkers. But as a builder, he was not a good builder. He was good at building barns, but not houses.
Yeah.
And he built that extension on the house,
kitchen on the house.
made the kitchen bigger, but one window was leaning like that. You know.
What did he say
And
when you pointed out to him?
I pulled the nails out and straightened it up.
Oh, you did? You straightened it out yourself?
I straightened it up, yeah. But that window was leaning like this, and he just left it like that. You know.
When you talked to him about it, he said, "It's not my house," something like that?
He said, "I don't care, it's not my house." That's what he said. And he also, the bedroom in the back, where Mom and Dad slept.
Did he put that in?
He put that on there, just rough boards, you know, and in the wintertime it was about as cold inside as outside, you know. And it was just a bad job. It was really a bad job. And there were no windows in there.
Really? No windows in there?
There were no windows in there, and it was pitch dark and right in the middle of the day.
Right.
No windows.
No windows at all.
There you go on the outside, no windows.
Wow. Wow.
And see, it should have 2 windows, one on each side.
Right. At least that many. Yeah.
And insulation and all that, but no, didn't put any insulation, nothing.
Nothing in there.
And when you walk in there, it's just as cold inside as outside.
Yeah.
You know, I don't see how they even. So wonder they didn't get pneumonia or something.
Yeah. Right. How they even survived.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was a pretty good checker player. But after I caught on to him, I could beat him, John could beat him.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Because he would start to laugh. When he started to laugh, he'd won the game.
Yeah, he's won the game, yeah.
Yeah. So, how did you get into being an electrician and inspector and all that? Tell us about that.
So far as electricity, I started out by wiring the barn and the sheds and all that, and I put switches in and all that. That was the beginning. And then the house in the woods, little house in the woods, I wired that. And I learned more and more about wiring. I really like to wire. And I took the electrical test.
You did?
I took the electrical test, you know, to get my license, and I passed.
You passed it?
Yeah.
And
so the inspectors in not in Hillsborough County, but it was a county above Hillsborough. I forget. Oh, Manatee County. I wasn't licensed in Manatee County. I was licensed in Hillsborough County and Pasco County. I was licensed, but I was not licensed in Manatee County. Well, Manatee County called me and said they had work for me. And so I went out on the beach and I wired houses and everything, and they never asked me for my credentials.
is that right?
Yeah, they never asked me for my credentials, and I did a lot of wiring there, and they had the money right there for me and everything. And Keller Wells was working for me, but everything he did wrong. You know, he was no electrician.
No electrician.
And so I did some work there, and also I wired pools as well. And I knew how to wire the pools. And Keller went with me. See, he couldn't make enough money with a small group at church. See, you need at least 100 people to raise enough, you know, to pay the pastor.
Yeah.
And so he made some extra money. And so Keller Wells' wife was in the hospital. And we stopped to see her. And she said, I've got to have $1,000 or they won't let me out. I've got to have $1,000. And so I said to Keller, you know, I was the treasurer of the church. We only had $800.
Yeah.
And Keller said, she's a liar. She said she don't have to pay nothing, get out. All she needs to do is walk out. That's all. But she's telling you lies. She wants money and she's telling you lies. And he said, in the first place, it's none of your business. And he said, if you want to give her all the money, let her have it. Let her blow it all away.
Yeah.
You know, and he's just talking like that. And so when he got done, I started down the road, and Shirley said, I'm not going back there anymore. You know, the treatment that we got, and he's shouting at me and all that, and we didn't do any wrong, and so forth, says, I'm not going back anymore. So I turned around, and when I got back, he was gone, and I had the key to the church, and I opened it up, and I left a little note. We're going to, I forget exactly how I worded. I didn't say I was going to another church, but I said we're going to new places for services or something like that.
Right.
And so he came over to our house. And when we lived next to the lake, you remember our house, don't you?
Yeah.
And yeah, you was there.
That was Riverview.
Riverview, yeah. And he came over and he says, how come you left me a note that you wasn't going to come back? And I said, well, we just felt that it's time to make a change.
Right.
And he said, well, I didn't tell you that you could make a change. And I said, well, I'm sorry, but I said, we ran into some difficulty, and I said, we just felt we got to make a change, you know, and all that. And he was there 2 hours shouting at us, and just, he was angry and all that, and shouting and shouting and shouting. But see, that's not really the way to do it.
No.
It's really not the way to do it. And
a lot of people would have called the police.
So we left, and we started going to a Baptist church near our house. And when Halloween came around, they kept Halloween. And I don't think a church should keep Halloween.
No.
And so when they had Halloween in the church, we didn't go, and we didn't go back. We didn't go there anymore.
Yeah.
And so they came over, and they were mad. You know, I had no business leaving the church and all that.
Right.
And they said, there's nothing wrong with Halloween, but I don't think that Halloween is for a church.
No.
And so then we start going to another church on Gibson Drive, another Baptist church. And then we ran into trouble. And then we moved to Sun City Center. We went to the Baptist church. We ran into trouble again. They came over shouting at me and all that, cussing and carrying on. And and I got tired of it, and I didn't go back to church. And so Cheryl asked me, where are we going to go? We've been to all the Baptist church. Are you going to another church? I said, we're going to find another church.
Mm-hmm.
And the people from the Methodist church, 2 men came over from the Methodist church,
Mm-hmm.
and they said, we will not attack you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're going to preach the gospel. We're going to give you the gospel. You can teach a class.
Mm-hmm.
You can help us do anything that you want to do, but we're not going to attack you.
Mm-hmm.
And we were there 11 years.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
And then after that, we went to the Presbyterian.
Is that right? Went to the Presbyterian.
And when I was recently, when I was in my house with a little bit of furniture in it, you know, and I went to the Presbyterian church, they ran me out.
Is that right?
Yeah. And they never said what was wrong. They just said, we want you to leave the premises and leave it now. Don't ever come back. And I had no idea. So I left, and finally I met a guy that had attended there, and he says, I know what you did. I said, what did I do? And he said, you ran cats down and cut their tails off. And I said, I've never done that. I've never done that in my life. I said, where did they get that from? He said, must have got it from Cheryl. And so I didn't know where to go, so I went back to the Methodist church, and the preacher came running out, and he hugged me, and he said, it is so good to have you back.
Huh.
And so I said, you might get a bad letter. And I said, I've been accused of running cats down, cutting their tails off, and I said, I've never done that, and I'm never going to do it. And so he said, if we get a letter, a bad letter, no one's going to see it. We're going to tear it up. See, the Presbyterian should have done the same thing.
Yeah.
But they did
the same thing.
But they didn't do it. They attacked.
Yeah. Now it's interesting, Dana. You had one of Betty's relatives, Orlando Wenger, who helped take care of your kids. Isn't that right? For a number of years. Tell me a little bit about Orlando. What kind of person was he?
Yeah, Orlando. He didn't want to spend any money. He was worth about $15,000. He had it in the bank. And I took him to Ohio just to see the bank.
Really? No other reason?
It was on Sunday.
On Sunday, just to see the bank?
Yeah, and he just kept after me. He wants to see the bank. And his neck was stiff. He couldn't.
Yeah, couldn't go.
And I had to back around just right so he could see the bank. And he said, isn't that nice? That's the bank. And then I took off. I went 500 miles.
500 miles for him to look at that bank?
To look at the bank.
How long did he look at it for?
For about 5 minutes.
Is that right?
Then he looked at it, but he never took a penny out of the bank.
Is that right?
And he would stay at our house until we said, we need money.
Yeah.
And then he would go to another place.
Uh-huh.
And he would stay there until they wanted money.
Okay. So
and then he would come back to our house or go to somewhere else, and to keep from paying until they wanted money.
They wanted money.
You know.
Yeah, right.
And but he never paid a penny to anybody. And he saved every penny. And when he died, his brother went and got everything and blew it all away.
Blew it all up in no time.
Blew it all away.
No time at all. Tell me about the egg sandwich.
The what?
The egg sandwich.
The egg sandwich.
He went to a restaurant, put his finger down the menu.
Yeah. We went to a restaurant, and he looked down the menu like that, and he told the lady, potatoes. And they brought a little dish potatoes.
Is that right?
About this big around, you know. They brought it over, set it down, and he looked at it and he said, "Where are the potatoes?" See, he expected a big
he expected a big thing, yeah.
And when you just gobble it all
down,
down,
right,
and
right.
all that.
Right.
But see, his main thing was saving money for nothing.
For nothing, right.
He never spent it.
Never spent it,
Never
right.
spent it. And when he died, his brother blew it all away, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And he had no use of it.
But he ran and figured out the menu where it said egg sandwich, so out of the cheapest sandwich, and they said, "I love egg sandwiches."
Yeah, I think he did say that.
He did say,
yeah.
right. You told us that.
Yeah. And he would look for the cheap. He didn't care what kind of sandwich it was, just the cheapest.
Just cheapest.
The very cheapest.
Very cheapest sandwich. Yeah. And he took care of your kids then for some time, didn't he?
Yeah, and see, he had big sores on his leg, just big sores like that, you know, on his leg. And he sent some kids out in the pasture to get milkweed, and he put it on his sores, and he got tetanus.
Is that right?
See, the cows were there, yeah, and he got lockjaw and they killed him.
Is that what killed him?
Like I had lockjaw.
Lockjaw, wow.
Yeah, see, he should have known that you can't go out in the pasture field.
Yeah.
And just, I guess if you would have washed it.
Yeah, washed it out, would have been okay.
But see, he would just grab it and break it, you know, and put it on and all that. That's dangerous, you know, in the cow pasture.
Yeah. Now, but Landon General had a good personality, didn't he? He was friendly and like that?
Yeah, yeah. He was friendly, but he was, his crutches were wearing out, and he tried to fix them and tried to fix them until he just couldn't fix them anymore, you know. And a new crutches would have cost him $10, but he's not going to spend $10. You know, he's not going to spend nothing. It's all going in the bank. But he died and didn't use any of it.
Yeah. Now, Danny, you're retired now. How long have you been retired?
About 3 years.
About 3 years. So, what are your aims for the rest of your life? What would you like to do? What would your plans?
Well, for the rest of my life, I like to speed walk up to 10 miles.
Is that right? Every day?
Yeah, every day. I'm out. Now, I've missed about 2 days. So,
are you in perfect health then? Keep you in...
Well, yeah, the doctor said I'm in perfect health. And tomorrow, I'm going to speed walk. And I'll do probably 5-6 miles. And I can do 10 miles and I won't even be tired, because I've done it all my life.
Done it all your life?
Yeah.
Do you have any plans to travel?
Yeah. If I get my house, see, between me and Shelby, we get more than $3,000 a month. And if I can get my house debt-free, I've got $40,000 left. And if I could give her 20 and say, you know, I can put Shelby's name on it instead of her, I'll be in good shape.
You'll be in good shape then?
Yeah, see, I won't have no monthly fee or nothing, and we can travel all over the world.
Good. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well.
And the longer I worked, the more money I made. Towards the last, I made $80,000.
Is that right? Well, that was a good income.
$80,000.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Danny, we thank you for all the memories you've given us, and you could spend all night talking about the past, but you brought some of the highlights that were important to you.
And see, and being a Christian at such a young state, and I never heard the word Christian.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I never heard the word Christian. God put it in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
And I told my mother I want to be a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad and my mother were discussing what's a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
And they were discussing, they just couldn't figure out what's a Christian.
Mm-hmm. Couldn't figure it out.
But I knew what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And I would walk out and look at the sky, and I would pray and pray and pray,
Mm-hmm.
and God answered my prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never got into trouble because from 5 years old, I was a Christian.
Yeah.
There's nothing I could do about
Yeah.
it.
And that's the most important thing in life is
That's
to
right.
have a relationship with Jesus Christ.
That's right.
To be a Christian, that's the most important thing in life.
And if I go to bed before Shelby does, sometimes I pray for an hour.
Is that right? That's good. Wonderful. Okay. Well, thanks a lot for your history, Dan, and we can all profit from your experiences in life.
Mm-hmm.
Amen.